When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: Into the Tall Grass. User: Y8Vin2. Posted February 10th, 1998.
The Boss has a lot of great songs, but for my money, nothing will ever beat The River. When you grow up having the shit kicked out of you by life, you don't hear lines like, "Is a dream a lie if it doesn't come true?" as much as you feel them settle deep into your heart. When I was a kid, back before I went missing, before a drunk driver would send my parents to their reward, my dad would play that album over and over again. When I was small, he and my mom would sometimes spontaneously start dancing to whatever cut happened to be playing, a fast bop to Sherry Darling or swaying to The Price You Pay. I'd always act like it was embarrassing, but it was just an act. Seeing them so in love with each other made me feel safe in ways I didn't understand until it ended. Dad kept playing the album, yet they danced less and less until one day I realized I couldn't remember the last time. I've been a private investigator for close to 12 years and have heard the phrase, "stay together for the children," more times than I can count. It's a bullshit excuse people use to avoid making the hard decisions. I like to think that if I hadn't gone missing when I did, my parents would have just gotten it over with and signed the papers. There's a casual cruelty to making a kid live in the coldness that fills up a house when love has left it, and I don't like the thought of either of them being cruel. As for my going missing, there isn't much to tell. I was one of 8 teenagers who vanished into thin air during a class field trip to our local state park in March of 1983. If you haven't heard of the Coleman 8, don't feel too bad, as we barely made a dent in the local newspapers, let alone national media. Even weirder, from what I was able to gather afterward, there was no organized effort to look for us. Our parents just accepted that we were gone, and when we were finally recovered 2 weeks later in a river in that same park, they accepted that we were back. Not a single media outlet covered our surprise reappearance or seemed to give a shit that none of us had a single memory of our lost time. It was like a giant hand had pushed the pause button on all our lives, then restarted them at its convenience. I'd been back less than a week when the driver of a chartered bus crossed the center line of a bridge and crushed my parents' Aerostar. Dad had been a cop in the city, and his partner, who I'd been raised to call Uncle Rob, came to tell me what had happened. The hell of it is, I already knew. And what I'd later find out was the moment my parents' lives ended, I'd felt them go, as if part of me were being permanently carved away. Finding that out began a process, at the end of which I came to realize something about me had changed during our lost 2 weeks. Sometimes now I just knew things. Rob took me in and raised me like his own son. He tried to steer me toward the department, but the rigidity of its structure was a bad fit for my personality. once I was old enough to access it, the insurance payout from Mom and Dad's accident allowed me to live comfortably so long as I didn't pick up any expensive habits. I moved back into our old house to live a kind of half-life among the collected memories of our past. My intuition made me good at finding things, and I started a half-assed PI business to go along with my half-assed life. If someone who needed a very particular kind of help came Rob's way, usually something offbeat that couldn't be put in a report, or a missing persons case he knew the system would fumble, Rob would put him in my direction. There wasn't a lot of ambition or effort to it, but it kept me busy. A case that took me right back to the state park where it all started would finally force me to grow up and get my shit together. After that, I started doing the job for real. Got a license, an office, everything. My clients are mostly garden variety divorces and runaways these days, but every now and then, Rob will still give me the nod if someone comes looking for a particular kind of help. Last Thursday, a woman named Jessica came to me with one such case. November is always quiet in my business, and that slowness combined with the usual bitter Midwestern cold can sometimes make me pretty blue. Thankfully, this year there's been more sunshine than usual, and I've also finally bought one of those digital answering machines so I can step out of the office for a coffee or a sandwich without worrying about missing incoming work. That's where I was headed on Thursday when I heard the bell above the reception door ring. The woman who entered was small, maybe 5'2", with long blonde hair and a pale complexion. She was wearing a beat-up Carhartt jacket, at least 2 sizes too big for her, and faded blue jeans. In fact, faded was a good way to describe her. She was almost pretty, but in a way that looked like she had been photocopied too many times. Her movements were quick but tentative, and when she looked at me through the door that separated my office from the lobby, then at the empty reception desk, I saw fear in her eyes. She was nervous being alone around a strange man. Couldn't say I blamed her. "Hey there," I said. Can I help you?" She kept one hand on the doorknob, looking at the sign. "I'm looking for Mr. Farmer." I nodded. Coffee was going to have to wait. "That's me. Please, come in." She kept standing there, letting the heat out. She seemed to be making an internal decision. "Can I see your ID?" That was a first. This sort of thing, the customer experience you might call it, was not a part of the business where I excelled. "If you come in, I'll be happy to show you my credentials, but I need you to stop letting the heat out of my office." This threw her off, and she looked down at her hand on the doorknob as if she hadn't considered where it was. "Oh, yeah, of course, I'm sorry." She let go, and the door clicked back into place. I pulled my wallet from my back pocket, opened it to the windowed compartment that held my license, and placed it face up on the desk. As I moved back, she came forward, step by cautious step, until she could verify that I was who I'd said I was. Once she had, she relaxed, the shoulders of her 2 big jackets slumping down. "Sorry, Mr. Farmer, I've had bad experiences before. With men, I mean." "I understand. Better to be safe than sorry. Please, sit." She settled herself into one of the visitor chairs opposite my desk while I put my wallet away. She was small enough she was able to draw her knees up and plant her feet in front of her. It was a defensive posture, my ID not enough to make her forget a lifetime of bad luck, so I tried not to visibly bristle at the thought of her shoes grinding dirt into my office furniture. "How can I help you, miss?" "Jessica. Please call me Jessica. I'd prefer not to use my last name, if that's okay." I shrugged. "Jessica is fine by me. What brings you here, Jessica?" She took a moment, pushing a lock of hair back behind her ear. "Detective Lefkowitz sent me. He said that you have experience with situations like mine. Things where the police can't really help." That's fair enough. Can you tell me a little about your situation? She raised her left hand and started chewing on the nail before pointedly stopping herself, as if it was a bad habit she was trying to shake. She took a breath, then spoke. Sometimes I dream about things that come true. Ah, that's why Rob sent her to me. Okay, go on. I know how that sounds, and I don't want you to think I'm crazy, but it's true. It's never big stuff, right? Just little stuff. If someone I haven't talked to in a while is sick, I'll see them, or if they lose something, I might dream about the location. It doesn't happen all the time, but when it does, I'm never wrong. You understand? Her eyes searched my face, probably looking for the condescending grin she'd grown accustomed to seeing after admitting this. As it happens, I'm not that expressive, and I've seen weirder shit than you can possibly imagine, so psychic dreams don't even move the needle. I understand. Precognitive dreams, I've had them as well. She looked surprised, as if she'd never heard that before. Right, yeah, exactly. Well, about 3 months ago, I started having these dreams, but they're not the same as the others. In them, I'm sitting at a picnic table near a playground. The sun is setting, but no matter how long the dream goes on, it never sets all the way. It's this deep orange light, almost like movie lightning. A chill of familiarity ran through me. The first time I had the dream, I was sitting there and a girl came up to me at the table. She looked maybe 12 or 13. Her hair was blonde, like mine. She looked sad. She said she needed my help, that she had been kidnapped and murdered 10 years ago. It was terrible, the things they did to her. I frowned. She told you how she died in detail? Jessica nodded emphatically, her hair swinging enough she had to push it back behind her ears again. She told me everything. How her parents used to leave her at the lake all day in the summer because they thought she would be able to play with all the kids, but she didn't like playing with little kids. She spent most of her time trying to hang out with the teenagers who worked at the snack shack and hung out at the beach and picnic table area. She lied about things a lot, not because she was a bad kid, but because she was trying to project a certain image. She often said she was older than she actually was. She would tell other kids she knew how to drive or that she had been to Disneyland, little white lies she thought made her life sound more impressive. In the end, all it did was attract the men who, well, killed her. There were a few lakes within an hour's drive of the city, but already I had a feeling I knew which one we were talking about. Jessica had paused, presumably to let all this sink in, so I asked the question. Do you know which lake this was, Jessica? She nodded. Carter Lake in Coleman Park. There it was. And this little girl, did she tell you her name? No, that's the thing. That's why I need you, Mr. Farmer. I have a lot of details about her home life, what her parents were like, even where she was taken from. What I need you to figure out is her name. And why is that? Her eyes were bright. Because she told me where in the park those men hid her all those years ago, and she asked me to come find her. She said there won't be any way to identify her after being buried for so long, so if we find her name, I can tell her family what happened. They'll finally have closure. Closure. It's a word that gets a lot of play when you talk about missing people. The hell of it is, the grieving process doesn't work that way. Putting a period after a word might end that particular sentence, but then another one starts, and period or no, it always follows on from the one before it. Having someone you love go missing is a sentence written in ink. It might become insignificant relative to the larger story, but it's always there. Jessica, what else do you know about this girl? She cocked her head to one side, thinking about it. When I first started dreaming about her, it was mostly just her demanding that I find her body so her parents would know what happened to her. I know she was abducted from and is now buried in Coleman State Park. She's been missing since the mid-1980s and was around middle school aged or maybe a little younger at the time she went missing. She was young, but she did try to dress and act older in order to try to hang out with the high school kids who worked at the snack shack. Her parents weren't abusive, but they weren't very attentive. She spent a lot of time alone or getting dropped off at a park or pool because her parents worked a lot but couldn't afford a sitter. I gently placed my hands on the desk in front of me. Anything else? One of the things that she tells me the most is that she wishes her family cared about her as much as when she was alive as they did after she went missing. Someone in her immediate family had alcohol issues, and I think that was their main focus. She was either an only child, or if she had any siblings, they were significantly older or younger. She loved dolphins and whales. She was smart, but didn't always do well in school. Even though she was younger, she walked a lot of places by herself and sometimes took public transportation by herself. Her abduction and murder were part of a pattern, and as far as I know, the murderers were never caught. And that's everything. She thought about it again for a second, then agreed. And while I'm looking for her name, you're going to be... I let the sentence trail off. Looking for her body, like she asked. I've been waiting for a while for work to give me the time off. She said I should do it during the week when there are fewer people around to ask questions or get in the way. I guess they buried her pretty deep. I exhaled, pressing my palms into the cool wood of the desk. Jessica, before I say anything else, I want you to know I believe you. Every word. I believe you've been having these dreams and that in them, this little girl has come to you asking for help. With that said, I don't think you should go looking for the body. Jessica's face clouded, a look of cynicism creeping in. Oh yeah? Why's that? I knew I had to choose my words carefully. Does it seem odd to you at all that this little girl could tell you so much about herself, her fears, her loneliness, the things she enjoyed, and yet never tell you her name? Jessica's feet left the chair, planting firmly on the ground. She gripped her knees, and uncertainty stole across her face before she could hide it. No, maybe she can't. I don't know, maybe it's like an afterlife law or something. Who cares? She needs my help. I held up my hands in a sort of conciliatory gesture. Okay, let's look at this another way. In everything else she told you about her life, is there a single piece of hard information? Where she lived, her mother's first name, her father's? Again, a flash of uncertainty, but this time she visibly fought it back. She stood, her fists balled at her side. No, but she told me so much. Maybe she wanted me to look, so she felt like someone cared. They never cared when she was alive. No matter what she did or how she tried to make them love her, it was never enough. She just fell through the cracks and they just let it happen. This wasn't just about the kid, and whatever had been reaching out to her knew it. Probably chose her for that reason. Jessica, please have a seat. Let me explain. Explain what? That you don't believe someone like me can be special? That I can have this ability? I believe you. There isn't a doubt in my mind that you have precognitive dreams. I don't doubt you at all. I doubt her, the girl, or at least what's pretending to be a girl. Her mouth twisted in a grimace. What the fuck do you mean pretending to be a girl? Look, I have a lot of experience with this kind of stuff. That doesn't make me better than you or more capable, but it means I've been around the block enough times to know that not everything out there is upfront about what it really wants. A few years ago, I was approached by two different, unrelated people who were being visited in their dreams by a teenager who had gone missing at a rest stop out in Pinewood Forest. They found her car in the parking lot, but not her. These people who had the dreams, they said this teenager had come to them saying she'd been murdered by a pair of serial killers and buried several miles out into the woods. This girl told them they should come alone to find her so her family could have closure. Okay, so what? Did they find the body? No, because there was no body to be found. The news had reported the car, but the Oklahoma City bombing knocked everything else off the news for days after that. It was never reported that the girl was alive and had gone on a road trip with her new boyfriend without telling anyone. Before leaving, she'd lent her car to a roommate who had had it die on her at the rest stop. She'd hitched back to town and was trying to get money together for a tow when it was reported as abandoned. No one was dead, so what reached out to two total strangers, pretending to be a murdered girl who wasn't actually murdered, trying to lure them into the woods alone? Some of the tension went out of her small frame, and I could practically see the wheels turning in her head. She looked confused, hurt, and angry in equal proportion. But she wouldn't. The pale girl was shaking. I knew it could still go either way. The people who legitimately have psychic sensitivity are often the ones least prepared to deal with its implications. They're frequently the outcasts, the abused, the ignored. I don't know why it happens that way, but it does, and too many of them need so badly to prove that despite what everyone in their life says, they're special, that they don't question where or who these messages are coming from. Think about it. In your other precognitive dreams, was there any ambiguity? Did anybody have to tell you the information, or did you see it directly? You saw it, right? And I saw her. Right, because it's real. Whatever's pretending to be that girl is real. The things she says are not. There's another world out there, Jessica. I was trapped there twice, once as a boy and again in my 20s. It's hard to remember what I saw, but I know it was dangerous in a way we can't fully comprehend. You said it was always sunset in those dreams. Tell me, did you ever see beyond the playground? Did you see the tall grass? Her face went blank. You did, didn't you? That place isn't a dream. It exists, just not in our reality. That's where I went when I disappeared, into the tall grass. Whatever is calling to you from over there, Jessica, it's not what it appears to be. She stepped back, one hand reaching out blindly for the doorframe. You're lying. Detective Lefkowitz probably told you what I was going to say. She decided, no matter what else I said, she was going out there by herself to look, because in her world, things either were or they weren't. She was either picking up psychic messages or she wasn't, special or not special. And she needed to be special. Still, I tried. He never told me you were coming. I have no reason to lie to you. Finding missing people is what I do because I know what it's like to have someone else take control of your life. She was shaking her head, her face hard. Bullshit, bullshit. She almost spat the words. If you'd gone missing, I'd know about it. It would have been in the newspapers. I've lived here my whole life and I haven't seen jack shit. You just don't want me to find her. Well, too fucking bad, because I'm going to. She slammed the door so hard on her way out that one of my poster frames fell off the wall, glass shattering onto the carpet. I considered going after her, but it would only make things worse. Whatever was trying to manipulate her had gotten its hooks in, and the only thing to be gained by interfering would be to be dragged along with her. I'd been down that road before and had no intentions of going back. I waited 10 minutes, then went off in search of a coffee. Rob called me this morning to let me know that search and rescue had fished Jessica out of Carter Lake. Because of the body's maceration, they're not sure how long she'd been in the water, but if I had to guess, I'd say she hadn't waited for her time off. In fact, I'd bet every penny I had that she'd gone straight out there after leaving my office. Straight out into the tall grass.
Subject, that'll happen. User, btex2r12. Posted, March 24th, 1996.
There's a stretch of road down in Texas that you could not pay me to drive again. Every lady on Baywatch could pull a dump truck full of money up to my house, and if the whole deal was contingent on me getting anywhere near McMullen County, I'd tell them to keep driving. It's not that I have anything against the people of that fair state or even the countryside itself, but one night, years back, my family was trapped on one of those roads, and the memory has never left me. This would have to have been 1978 because we were driving my grandfather's big 98 LS. The following year, it was totaled when the brakes on a dump truck failed, sending it straight into the George Theriot parking lot where the beautiful old sedan was parked. Grandpa wasn't in the car, thank God, because it'd have crushed him flat. He was sure heartbroken, though, never bought another Oldsmobile again. So, November 1978, and my family was coming back to Houston from Laredo. There's a few ways to make the trip, and since we'd come this way before, we thought it might be fun to change it up a bit. We decided to cut up San Antonio way, which the map said would take us right through Tilden. It's a small town, maybe a couple hundred people, and we figured there'd at least be somewhere to stop for dinner. We were wrong. By the time we got to town, it was only 5 to 5:30 at night, but it may as well have been 3 a.m. for all the people we saw on the street. In fact, the way it all felt, you'd think there wasn't anyone inside the buildings either. There were 2 cafes, both closed, plus a gas station that was just as empty. The shadows were already long when we got to town. After a half hour of hunting around and failing to find a single person, the sun was almost below the horizon. The sandy-colored bricks of the county courthouse were bathed in the fading pink of old Pepto-Bismol, the white columns out front smudged, greasy. The final sliver of sunset seemed to trigger a realization in all of us that this wasn't just a garden variety pain in the ass. Something was wrong in a big way. Collectively, the 4 of us decided dinner could wait the hour and a half to San Antonio. We pulled back in the big silver car and hit the gas, watching the courthouse and then the rest of town recede into the distance behind us. Once the sun had dropped fully below the horizon, it got dark fast. We'd been driving for maybe half an hour, never encountering a single car in either direction or a headlight on the horizon when we saw a sign up ahead in our high beams. It said, "Welcome to Tilden." There was a moment of disorientation, like I'd sat up too fast, and then, sure as God made little green apples, we rolled up on the county courthouse. Dad was driving, Mom in the passenger seat, and she gave him supreme shit for going in circles, even though he insisted he hadn't. She turned on the overhead light and flipped through a few of the maps in the glove box until she found the right one. The crinkling it made as it was unfolded sounded loud, louder than the idling engine. Mom found the road we were on and dragged her finger up, trying to figure out where we'd gone wrong. Once she thought she had sussed it out, she told Dad to drive. Again, the courthouse disappeared behind us, and yes, we came upon it again after 30 minutes of pushing forward in what should have been a straight line. This happened over and over for what felt like hours, ending up with us parked in front of the county courthouse. Its dark front windows looking more and more like eyes with each passing trip. Not only were there no people, there were no lights on. Our headlights were the only illumination, and once we ran out of gas, which was now becoming a real possibility, they'd only last so long. Having moved through arguing, shouting, and ultimately crying, my parents sat in silence, the map spread limply across Mom's knees. We were hungry. Tired, we were all increasingly sure we would never be leaving this place. Dad turned off the car to conserve what little fuel he could, darkness swarming in. For what had to have been an hour, we sat there, our breathing the only sound. It was so quiet that when an outside noise became faintly audible, it was impossible not to recognize it as another car engine. Soon, the night was split by a pair of headlights coming around a corner off to our left, telling us to stay put. Dad got out of the car, his legs wobbly from sitting for so long. He waved at the newcomers, calling out for help. It looked as if they had originally intended to turn left away from us, but upon seeing Dad, the driver took a wide turn to the right, pulling up alongside. The man who cranked down the driver's side window was clearly drunk, but his face was broad and kind. He asked Dad what the trouble was, and when Dad said we couldn't seem to find our way out of town, the man nodded. "That'll happen," he said. He conferred with the person sitting next to him, who said something I couldn't hear. Then the first man told Dad they'd lead us out of town. All we had to do was follow the headlights. Dad thanked them profusely, then got back into the 98 and turned over the engine. The men pulled a U-turn and headed out along the same road we'd been taking all night. 10 minutes later, in addition to the car ahead of us, we began to see far ahead the lights from other vehicles traveling east to west. Somehow, we'd made it to the highway, driving exactly the same route we did before. The men who led us there didn't even stop to say goodbye. They just pulled another U-turn and went back the way we'd come, leaving us in total disbelief. From there, we made a beeline to the nearest gas station and stayed in the safety of those lights for a good long while. So now you understand why, after making it out of McMullen County, Texas once, I've no intention of going back.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.